Everybody, welcome back to the latest instalment of Terrace Talk. Disappointment at Ewood Park for Norwich City, of course, dropping those vital 2 points at the last seconds of the game to Andy Vyman's header. They're hoping to bounce back under the lights at Carrow Road on Friday evening when Oxford United make the visit to Norfolk for the first time in over 20 years. Looking forward to it. Of course, as always, with that, delighted to be joined by Liam Rice, the U's correspondent for the Oxford Mail. Liam, first and foremost, thanks for your time this afternoon. Let's get straight into it. Kind of been a bit of a up and down season, I would say, for the U's at the time of recording. I mean, just going to bring up the league table. Sitting, in 18th, quite a comfortable gap away from the bottom three, but probably a little bit concerningly is the form of late, winless in the last 7. What's kind of the fan feeling at the moment around the club? Because, kind of had that really good run under Gary Rowett when he first came in, but recent results haven't been quite so good.
Yeah, I think you've put it in a little bit of a nutshell there. It's the sort of the topsy-turvy nature of the Championship, which one kind of continual learning experience for Oxford United. This is obviously, as we'll have touched upon back in August, the first time they've been here for 25 years, and it's a different beast now, isn't it, the Championship? So, run of form lately has been a little maybe concerning, would be possibly a tad strong, but obviously the goals is what has been a concern. 1 goal in 6 prior to the 2 scored against Coventry at the weekend, and sort of creating those chances has been problematic. But they still have a buffer between themselves and the bottom 3, and I think if you'd have offered that sort of position to I'd wager most fans before a ball was kicked, you'd probably have found that a lot of hands would have been snapped off for that.
Yeah, we spoke there about sort of the peaks and troughs of this season so far. I mean, it was a season that started obviously in the best possible way in the sunshine in August against Norwich City, and ultimately the sort of early signs were pretty positive, some good results in the early games, and Des Buckingham had got off to the perfect start. Mid-September hit and results started to tail off, just 1 win in 15. I mean, eventually obviously cost him his job. After the journey he'd been on, what was the reaction at that point to that, sacking? Because Norwich fans have been there at different times. Daniel Farke probably is the prime example where, they had been on such a good journey with him, and sometimes it just comes to that sort of sour end.
Yeah, I think initially it came as such a huge shock. He was, of the 3 managers that were promoted from League One with their clubs, he was the first to go, and many felt he was actually in the safest seat because he was, everyone knows the story really. He was the local boy, done good. He'd come in, achieved what he achieved with that remarkable run at the end of last season to get them into the playoffs, and then obviously to sort of be the underdog in the playoffs really, and then go and do what they did. And then, like you say, they had such a great start to this season. Form did unfortunately tail off, and yeah, it came as a shock, but I think in that sort of process of time of allowing fans to sort of see it, and then once Rowett was appointed, and you could see the direction obviously the club wanted to go down. The club wanted to put the safest bet on a manager who could make Oxford United what you'd call a championship club. So being a little bit more sturdy, solid, and at home, and ultimately they do and have done for the majority of Rowett's period now looked more at home. The football probably isn't as expansive or as exciting as it could have been under Buckingham and was under Buckingham, but survival's the game, and that's why the dice was rolled, and I suppose we'll only really know at the end of the season whether that was the right decision or not.
Yeah, you mentioned there Gary Rowett, of course, a very experienced manager at this level, spells at Millwall, Birmingham, Stoke, among many. So when he was appointed, what was kind of the feeling, I suppose, kind of a manager that a little bit in the Premier League camp of sort of Sam Allardyce's, who knows how to get teams out of trouble. So was that kind of the view of the fans at that point?
I think a little bit, yeah. I think there was a lot of, obviously, frustration and sort of bitterness in the way that the Des Buckingham sort of sacking was announced. I remember the club statement was sort of tragically short. I think if I top end it was like 82 words, which for a man who'd sort of had a Wembley promotion in his back pocket was a little sad. And I think fans, Rowett needed to come in and get results straight away. Of course, he did that, and they were unbeaten for quite a while before this current run that they're on now. So, but yeah, I think Rowett is maybe, like I said earlier, a little bit of a safer bet. He knows the division inside out. He's been doing the Championship now for sort of just over a decade at this level, managing some of the various clubs you've touched upon, and also has had success. I mean, you look at his Derby team. They were playoff semi-finalists the year, I think, before Lampard went in and got them to the playoff final against Villa. So he knows the league, he knows the division. He's sort of, I guess it's all the things like his contacts book as well. He'll know players. You've seen that already with sort of the signing of Tom Bradshaw in January. So it just sort of felt like someone who was a little bit more savvy is probably the right word at this level.
Yeah, home form feels like it's been the key to Oxford's potential survival this season. You look at the points tally, he's only 9 points on the road, just one win. I suppose with that, what's the difference been between home and away? Has it been that atmosphere, the kind of the, I suppose, unique nature of the Kassam that's sort of played into the season so far for Oxford?
A little bit. I think there's also that thing of you're a newly promoted club, your home form's is where you're going to pick up your results. And then I think Oxford have only maybe one away game on the road at Millwall on New Year's Day, which I think was Rowett's sort of first away game, if I'm correct off the top of my head. So I think the Kassam is, as we know, it's a funny old place. When it's at its when it's at its best, and it's sort of the wind might be sort of howling in, and the sort of home end is sort of on top. It is a unique atmosphere. I'm not saying it's a good atmosphere. I think a lot of fans would say that, but home form, making the Kassam a sort of a fortress, a tough place is it's going to be sort of crucial between now and the end of the season. And away from home, you've just got to pick up the points wherever you can. If it's the odd draw here and there, then that's the game, I guess.
Yeah, just touching on the January window, you mentioned Bradshaw's arrival, the likes of Hellick, of course, arriving, a spell at Barnsley, Huddersfield, had sort of some decent times in the Championship. Overall, what did kind of Oxford fans make of that business? Did they feel they'd done enough strengthening to sort of guide them clear, I suppose, at the bottom three between now and the end of the season?
Yeah, I think at the time, obviously, it probably did feel like a good window, to be fair. You mentioned Hellick. Hellick came in straight away and was sensational, actually. Elliot Moore, the skipper, was injured. And Hellick came in and looked the real part next to Kieran Brown at centre-back. Alex Matos has looked sort of a promising addition on loan from Chelsea. We've certainly not seen the best of him just yet. But then, then the experience of Bradshaw as well. And then the one that everyone was sort of, where to stand on, because the element of the unknown was obviously Ola Romani coming over from FC Utrecht. He, I think, in the Netherlands was on a winter break there, and then he needed a little bit of time to get to fitness, sort of find his feet in England. But he's come into the team in the past couple of weeks, scored against Coventry on Saturday, and actually looks a handful. It's hard to sort of say what his sort of best position might be. Sort of off the left, is he a 10? Is he a striker? Is he somewhere in the middle of all of that? But yeah, he looks like there is some raw potential there to work with. But as ever with these things, you can look at the January window and say, "Oh, we were sort of pleased at the time," but I think we'd like I think you could say a lot of clubs would like another striker through the door. Oxford are definitely one of those.
I think most Norwich fans would probably like any more strikers they can get. That's just the nature of the beast and football fans. In terms of connections between the two camps, you did mention one there, Alex Matos, formerly through the Norwich Academy. But the one I just wanted to ask you a little bit about is Shemi Plaheta, who, of course, made the move last summer. And I know Connor asked you early in the season sort of about him, but only seen him in pre-season. Over the bulk of sort of the 35 games of the season, what have you made of him so far?
His tale sort of this season reminds me a little bit of like another former Norwich winger in Josh Murphy. He's Murphy's time at Oxford is sort of well documented. Basically, 18 months of struggle with form, with fitness, despite being a huge name for the club in League One. And then obviously the back end of last season, he was absolutely unplayable, and it all culminated quite nicely with that Wembley brace in the playoff final. Plaheta started the season. I think he had a really good game against Norwich on the opening day, as did the whole team, to be fair. And then he sort of, looked not maybe quite as strong for a couple of games, and then injury struck quite soon in the season. He was back by sort of October, November, but needed a little bit of time to get going. The team was struggling when he was back in those sort of final few games under Des Buckingham, and under Rowett initially he was the man. You know, he was the sort of star player. It was a bit of a back to basics approach. He said, you know what, Shemi is ridiculously quick. That's his main asset. So let's play on it. Let's knock balls in front of him. Let's get him racing a fullback and literally play off that. And it suited him down to the ground. He scored a couple of goals in Wright's first 2 games. And like I say, he became this sort of the key player in the team, really, especially from a forward perspective. Form was probably tailed off a little bit then. I think he's become a little bit predictable in his play, cutting in from the right onto his left foot. There are calls, he has played a little bit on the left during games when subs have been made, etc. But I think there's an element of wanting to see what he can do on the left maybe now. Putting crosses in, that kind of stuff. So overall, though, it's been encouraging and promising. It's just consistency, which I guess is what you would probably say for his spell at Norwich. It's that consistency, and it's finding that week in, week out, which is basically the next steps he needs to take, really.
Yeah, that certainly feels like a very fair assessment from his time at Carrow Road. Who's been sort of the star player, I suppose, over the course of the season for Oxford? I mean, looking in, you always kind of pick the key players out. Brannigan's an Oxford legend and certainly done well since stepping back up to the Championship. Greg Lee seems to have found some goals at fullback. So is there sort of anyone that Norwich fans to be wary of ahead of Friday's game? Yeah,
Brannigan, Lee are good examples. Brannigan is, like you've sort of alluded to there, Mr. Oxford United. Lee is out with a hamstring injury, but as you say, he's scored some goals from left back and provided a really good threat there, especially in the lack of goal scoring in general. For me, the two would be the goalkeeper, Jamie Cumming. He's looked really at home at this level. You sort of basically every game now you're looking and thinking he's making at least one good save, if not one, excellent save per game now, and keeping either teams out or keeping scorelines lower or whatever that may be. Funnily enough, it was Saturday. He probably made his first mistake, I would say, sort of looping loose ball, and there was a bit of a skewed back pass from Brannigan, and Cumming was caught in two minds whether to come and go for it in that split second. Mason Clark came in and nipped in and headed home. So, but otherwise, Cumming's probably been my player of the season, to be quite honest. The other player is Kieran Brown, the centre half, Northern Ireland international, and he's been a real rock, really consistent week in, week out. You know exactly what you're going to get from him. He's your proper, clearances, blocks, tackles, interceptions, headers. He's a proper unit, proper rock at the back. Probably going to be playing left back now for a few weeks due to Lee and Joe Bennett both been injured, but he slots in there quite nicely. Not as you can imagine, a centre half playing left back he's not the most he's not as thrilling going forward as Lee, but he does a job, and those two players in him and Jamie Cumming have probably been United's star performers this season.
Yeah, we saw lots of those players sort of come to the fore in that game early in August. I mean, just going to bring up a photo now of that particular occasion, a 2-0 victory for Oxford. I mean, what was that start like back to life in the Championship? I'd imagine for all the youth fans, that was probably the dream opportunity off the back of that. Yeah,
I mean, even now, when you sort of think about it, it's a little bit... it still feels not surreal, but it was such a remarkable day. Obviously there were circumstances with Norwich, if I remember, with players wanting to leave and injuries and a new manager and all that sort of stuff, and maybe a quieter window up until that point than hoped or planned. But United preyed on those circumstances, and they were obviously still riding that crest of a wave of promotion. I think if you do cast your mind back to August, it was a thoroughly deserved win for Oxford. Now we are quite a bit later in this Championship season, so I suppose the scales are back in Norwich's favour. But United, I think they'll go there, with confidence despite this run they've been on. So it sets it up nicely for a nice Friday night under the lights, I think.
Yeah, you say about setting it up. So what's the approach? What's the lineup going to be from an Oxford perspective? Is there any key players missing? I suppose for injury, you did mention a few of those when we spoke just a little while ago there. So how do you suppose to see this game unfolding on Friday night?
I think Oxford under Rowett, away from home especially, it's be difficult to beat first and foremost. If you keep a clean sheet, you are going to get a point at least on the board. So I'm not saying it will be negative as such, but it will certainly be a tough nut to crack. Counter-attacking opportunities, prey on those and get forward in numbers when you do get those opportunities. Set pieces, Oxford have been quite good at set pieces. I think there is certainly room for them to be a lot better at set pieces, but they've already been quite good. Will Vauxhall has got a long throw-in, so that's another added weapon that they do sort of roll out, that Rowett sort of got them going with. They're quite hard to predict at the moment because of the recent sort of run of form and the sort of the lack of threat. But I think because of the nature in which the Coventry game completely opened up 4 goals in an 18-minute spell, two goals apiece, it means that hopefully they've got a bit more firepower and they've sort of found their mojo a little bit there. I think starting 11-wise, it'll most likely be, it will be Jamie coming in goal, barring any training ground injuries this week, hopefully not. Then I think it'd be a 4-2-3-1, so you'd be looking at the right back position could be up for grabs. It was Peter Kioso on Saturday, but I think Sam Long or Hida Travis any of those three could come in there. But then it will most likely be Elliot Moore, Michal Helik, and Kieran Brown, Brannigan and Volks in front. And then again, these sort of attacking options are a little bit up for grabs here, but Plata, Goodrum, and Romney will certainly be in the conversation, and most likely maybe Mark Harris leading the line. But there are other options. You've got your sort of Siriki Dembele's of the world, so Ruben Rodriguez. We'll probably know a bit more about that later in the week. But for now, that might be a solid sort of guess.
And to round off the show, going to push you for a prediction. I mean, this is the first time Oxford have visited Carrow Road since 1998. So there's probably a bit of excitement from your fan base heading down to Norfolk. Obviously not ideal with the Friday night shift, as we both know. How's kind of the game going to unfold in terms of a score prediction, if I had to push you?
I can't remember what I said last time, but I don't think I'd have gone as heavy with instead of an Oxford win. I might have played safe for a draw. So perhaps if I say a draw again, it might work to Oxford's favour somehow. But I think realistically, Norwich, although they're maybe at the tail end of that playoff race, as it were, are still probably the favourites, all being said. So maybe let's go for a draw again. A nice 2-2, goals at both ends, bit of entertainment. Most of us might be happy.
Yeah, entertainment and goals under lights sound good. Yeah, I'm hoping from a Norwich perspective, I think the pressure's going to be on them to try and get 3 points to keep within touching distance of that top 6 race, as you alluded. Liam, really do appreciate your time this afternoon. Great to have you back on the channel, speaking all things Oxford there. Obviously, lots of good content coming your ways as we head into this week. Of course, we'll be down at Colney later on this week, getting the full updates from Johannes Torp in terms of the press conference and players that will be available. We'll, of course, wait for updates on Lewis Dobbin and Ben Krezene after going off with injury in that trip to Ewood Park last weekend. Of course, we'll have all the usual stuff, tactics board, etc. So keep it locked across our channels. Of course, Pink and a Plus app is the place to go. Take out a subscription on there for all of the written content, and we'll see you at Carrow Road on Friday night under the lights, where hopefully we get a good game from both teams' perspective.